welcome back. Thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. And we've been listening to Pastor Mike teach in depth through the book of Matthew. And in reading the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus speaks of narrow gates, impossible standards, and righteousness that must exceed even the most religious. It sounds like the words of a hard man, a strict judge, someone unmoved by human weakness. And yet, turn the page and you meet the same Jesus touching the leper, healing the servant, welcoming the outsider, full of grace and overflowing with compassion. So how can the same person deliver such absolute truth and then extend such deep mercy? Well, let's follow along with Pastor Mike as he begins teaching at chapter 8, verse 1.
Read through the Sermon on the Mount and it feels somewhat narrow, and it is, right? Enter, he says, the narrow gate. Broad is the way that leads to destruction. Enter the narrow gate. It feels almost borderline impossible unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees. You will by no means even enter the kingdom of heaven. And you read those things and you think, what kind of person lays out such rigid rules, such firm statements, unmoving in some ways, unyielding in some ways. Just this is the way it goes, and that's destruction. Like the many people and only few will find the right way. Like who lays out truths like that? He must be like a hard man. He must be a mean man. He must be what so many in our culture try to turn anybody into who holds on to any measure of truth at all, where they don't just move with whatever subjective wind of desire is kind of painted out next, right? Where you hold on to truth. You must be a harsh person. You must be a mean person. You must be an unloving person, right? And then remarkably, right on the heels of that, Matthew gives us these scenes of what seems to us almost an entirely different approach, where Jesus expresses compassion and grace to everybody. And the remarkable thing about Jesus is that he can do both. He can do both. He can demonstrate, communicate incredible compassion and grace to every single person. We'll see by the end of this here in verse 16. At that point in time in his ministry, every single sick person is getting healed. Every single one, right? He would completely ruin hospital systems. By just this single act here, right? Every single sick person being healed, all right? He can be that gracious and yet that truthful, both at the same time. And the remarkable thing is he marries concepts, he marries characteristics within his own person that for us seem like they're diametrically opposed. They seem like they don't fit. And he brings them together, and this becomes the fullness of the revelation of God given to us in Jesus Christ. That's why I find this so remarkable. We begin here in verse 1 of chapter 8. It says, when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. Now we had seen that in Matthew chapter 4, verse 25, before he had gone up to the mountain, that the great multitudes were with him. When he had gone up to the mountain, some disciples, obviously, some followers did follow him up the mountain to hear him speak. But it does seem as if the great multitudes, the vast majority of people, stayed down at the base of the mountain, and they remained there until the message was over, and now he meets with them and the crowds then. And it says in verse 2, and behold, a leper came, not a leopard, right? A leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now, a leper, leprosy is an incurable skin disease. If you Google it, which I don't recommend that you do right now because you'll be very distracted, right? But if you Google it, you have to Google it under the term typically Hansen's disease, which is the modern terminology for it. Still a disease. It can be arrested now, and the symptoms are dealt with, but even to the present day, it is somewhat incurable, especially in the late stages where this man would be. So it's a skin disease that works by attacking the nervous system. And when the nervous system starts to degenerate, it reduces the amount of sensation to the appendages. And when that goes down, right, the propensity for infection, for cutting yourself and hurting yourself, or even having they would say that lepers would even have rats would bite off their fingers at night. They wouldn't even know that it was happening, kind of thing. Just dealing with those logistics was very, very difficult. Leprosy was considered a slow death. In the ancient society here, lepers, by and large, were never healed. We'll actually see Jesus say later, amongst the nation of Israel, there was never a leper healed. There were some, outside of Israel. Elijah, Elisha, they'd seen some miraculous healings. But by and large, within Israel, this was not something that had happened before. So as a result of it kind of being this life sentence, this threatening, foreboding death, basically considering somebody almost the walking dead, they would call them, dead before they were even going to die, kind of would leave them then ostracized because of the protocols that they would have to follow by covering their faces and other kinds of things. It would create these great separations within the society that not only would the leper have to deal with his own loss, his own death, he couldn't touch his family, he couldn't go live in his own house, he couldn't be in modern society, he couldn't go to worship at the temple, he couldn't be around, the people normally. There was all of these social stigmas that went along with being a leper. In addition to that, it was oftentimes communicated, if not outrightly, but certainly implied, that there is something inherently sinful in being a leper. That if God would allow an individual to contract leprosy, there must have been some great failure, some great sin in their life, which is all false. But that was the stigma that they lived under. Now, Luke tells us, Luke chapter 5, verse 12, when this man came to Jesus, that he was full of leprosy. So Dr. Luke gives us his diagnosis. This is not a man in the early stages. This is a man in the latter stages. This is a man, no doubt, years and years ago, that had seen a spot, right? Got somewhat concerned, went to the temple, to the priests, got a diagnosis like he was instructed in Leviticus 13, and then was told, you can't go back to your home. You have to live in the colony outside of the city, in the dump, in the heaps, in the groups of all of the rest of the lepers. And then watching, for years, watching this disease continue to spread, to continue to grow, to the place, no doubt, by this time, he's probably missing appendages to be full of leprosy. Again, things on the end of your body would begin to die, would begin to fall off. Appendages, it would be not uncommon for a leper to not have his fingers, to not have his toes, to not have his nose. It would just be wrapped. And this seems to be the condition of this man coming to Jesus. Now, against kind of all social protocol, he comes in the midst of the great multitudes. In this society, there were rabbis actually that boasted of the fact that when lepers got close, that they were kind of like the keepers of the peace, that they would throw rocks at lepers just to keep them at a distance. Push them away, separate away, because they didn't want that uncleanness. They didn't know how it was contracted. It was a fearful kind of thing. And so kind of to stand up and protect everybody else, we throw rocks at the lepers and we keep them at a distance. Here, this man comes and he presses into the crowd. How he gets there, I don't know. What kind of garb he's under, kind of fully covered, so nobody knows it's him. So nobody knows who he is and what he is. And kind of sneaking in there, Jesus is coming down. The multitudes are surrounding him. And this man, it says, he comes and he worships Jesus, which literally means he bows in the dust before the feet of his king. He'll call him Lord here, which sometimes means sir, other times means sovereign, right? In this man's attitude, he's certainly respecting him as a sovereign, as a king at least, if not as God himself. And he comes and he worships. Now, the interesting thing again is that Jesus has never healed a leper before. He doesn't have precedent. He doesn't know what Jesus is going to do. We're actually going to find by his request, he doesn't know what Jesus will want to do with him. There's no There's no promise. There's a faint hope maybe, but there's no like guarantee. If I do this, I'm going to leave the day and I will not be a leper anymore. I will be cleansed. I will be healed. There's none of that. But he comes and he worships before the feet of Jesus anyway. I think it's remarkable. Oftentimes we jump to the end of this, and as a result of it, we miss where we're at in the process. You know, remarkably, you read the Bible story, you get the conclusions of people's interactions with Jesus. And then we live our lives in a process, and we wonder like, why hasn't he done this yet? Well, you didn't get to verse 4. You're still in verse 2, right? It has to play out. You got to live this out in process. It looks like this, you know. Don't get to the end because you don't know what the end is going to be yet. You have to deal with what it is right here. This man doesn't know he's going to get healed, and he stays at the feet of Jesus anyway. Now, what he would probably expect to happen to him is for him to be picked up by whatever religious rabbi that would be there next and have somebody tell him, grab this guy, take him out of the city, throw stones at him, get him as far away from us as possible. That's what he would expect from his own society as a result of this action. But he's hoping for something else from Jesus. But he stays there and he worships anyway, long before he gets any word of healing. Listen, I would encourage you in this, right? You may not know what God's going to do next. You may not know what he wants to do with you, right? But the best place is at the feet of Jesus. The best place is at the feet of Jesus, right? And listen, if the only time you worship is when you want to get something from him, you're not genuinely worshiping, right? Genuine worship is not when you get anything from Jesus, but when you give to him his rightful place and due as king in your life. And it's a good place. It's a good place, right, to bow before the right king. Well, this man here, he's worshiping, saying Lord. Now, Lord, kurios, again, it can mean sir, but it can also reference somebody who is of a higher stature. Lord, he says, now look, if you are willing, you can make me clean. This statement is so telling. So telling. He is convinced, and we don't know how or why he's convinced of it. He is convinced that Jesus can cleanse him from this leprosy. He's convinced of it. Nobody's telling, hey, you need to trust Jesus. Jesus can do this. He's like, of course Jesus can do it. Shut up. I know this. Like, come on now. Like, nobody's encouraging him. Everybody's telling him not to do this. Everybody's telling them this can't happen. There's no way. Their situation's hopeless. You're helpless. There's nothing we can do or anybody can do for you. Just kind of suck it up, live out the rest of your days, hope that you die in your sleep or something painlessly or whatever kind of thing. And just, that's the best kind of thing for you. And he's like, no. I know Jesus can. I know Jesus can. How does he get to that conclusion? Except by watching Jesus and his character and his personality and his nature and his quality. There's something about the way that Jesus conducts himself. Not in healings yet. He hasn't started this yet. There's something, though, about the way that Jesus conducts himself as a man, as a human, as a person. That lets him know that there is something in him that makes it possible for him to heal this leper situation. The question that this leper has is this: are you willing? He says to Jesus, if you are willing, and it's literally, if you really want to, or if it's your heart's desire to. He's not asking whether or not Jesus is capable. He's asking whether or not Jesus is willing. And this is the thing of surrender that has to go before the Lord at every request like this. We know that you can. We just don't know if you want to. We know that you can, but it isn't your will. Now, in this context, and as we get down to verses 16 and 17, verses that have been used in kind of prosperity doctrine flavors or kind of health and wealth, kind of situations where people want to lay claim to every healing and every blessing and everything along these lines, you do need to recognize that Jesus made request of the Father that was rejected. Paul made request of the Father that was rejected. There are times that you can ask something of the Lord that is even good, and he will say no, because he knows that's for your best interest. You do not come to him as God and demand that you get your will. If you do that, then you're playing God. He's no longer God. You're playing God. You're just using him as your magic rabbit's foot or Santa Claus in some figure or form, right? Being able to say to the Father, I know you can. I know you can do anything. I just don't know if you want to. I don't know if it's your will or your purpose to do it, right? Back in 2013 when Julie was sick, right? This was our prayer. Lord, we know you can do anything. We just don't know if that's what you want to do. We don't know if that's your will, right? Whatever your will is, may it be done. Well, remarkably, then, says in verse 3, and I love the way Matthew writes this because he puts the action first and then the word second, even though both are happening at the same time. Then Jesus put out his hand and touched him. Jesus put out his hand and touched him. Now, in this society, this would have been one of those things you'd like, oh, he touched a leper. He's a rabbi. There's no way a rabbi would touch a leper. He touched a leper. You see him touch a leper. He touched a leper. You know, kind of thing. There would be all of this aghast kind of response to this. But he says it or does it while saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And it says immediately his leprosy was cleansed. So this begs the question, did Jesus in fact touch a leper? I don't know. Because by the time he touched him, was he actually a leper anymore? I don't know, right? Could have he conducted or contracted any uncleanness from the leper? Well, not if the leper's not a leper anymore, right? There's no uncleanness here. So we're going to argue about, well, the leprosy's gone. What accusation are you going to make against me, right? It is what it is. Move on, right? And this man, it says in Luke, actually, that he's made whole. Right? It's not just that the leprosy is arrested where it doesn't continue to move. It would move inward, right? It would move from the appendages and the extremities. It would start to move back. Eventually, it would get to the interior organs and the hearts and these kinds of things to shut bodies down, right? It's not just that it's arrested in whatever form it is in, right? Or maybe he still has his fingers. Maybe he still has his hand, but that's it, you know, kind of thing. Appendages start to grow back. This man is made whole, right? A little later in the Gospels, we will see Jesus reattach an ear, right? But wouldn't it also be really quite awesome to see a nose reappear, right? Just to grow back. I would hope it would take a little bit of time, just not be too fast, right? Because you would miss it. Like, whoa, you look different. What's going on, right? You can hold your glasses up now or something, whatever, you know. But just to see it like form, to grow, to go from that like pink baby flesh to like the normal skin so he doesn't look too weird moving forward, right? He's made whole. He's made whole. Now, remarkably in verse 4, Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one. See that you tell no one. It's a little too easy to pick on the health and wealth teachers of our day because of the goofiness of most of it. You get around some of these people and they don't see healings ever. Hardly ever. But they got healing ministry. We got a healing ministry. Well, how many people got healed last week? None. How about not last month? 0. How about last year? What? Maybe 0. I mean, somebody got a cold, but they got better, you know, kind of thing. But like a real true healing, I don't know. How about last year? Well, maybe none, kind of thing, right? If they would get one like this, they would be on the billboard, right? This would be the promotional material to come to our healing ministry. Look, leper, no longer a leper. We win, you know, kind of thing. Look at how powerful and how good we are. Jesus does not use this man for his own advertisement, which is an indication of the character of the man of Jesus Christ. He doesn't use him, right? He doesn't just make him fodder for his promotional displays, for his campaigns. He tells this man, don't tell anybody. Because if you do, you'll probably never even get back to the temple, right? You'll be on a speaking tour throughout Israel before you can even be pronounced clean, kind of thing. Don't tell anybody. This is kind of between you and me. Even though the multitudes are all watching this, right? Don't tell anyone. But he says, go your way. First, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded. Leviticus 14 detailed out how to be pronounced clean by the priests. But look, he says, as a testimony to them. The only individuals who are going to recognize this healing for what it is are the religious leaders who, despite their best intentions and desires, could never see a healing like this in their own authority and power, but only through Jesus Christ. Edersheim makes the point, from this point on, is when Jesus starts to take heat from the religious leaders, because now they have to reckon with the fact that he is not just a man teaching stuff, right? The healings are verifying his words. And rather than accepting that, most of them are trying to reject it, and they will end up trying to kill him as a result of it. But now they're becoming aware of actually what they're dealing with. And he wants them to, as a testimony to them. Now, verse 5. Now, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, slightly different scene, he's moving on here. Capernaum, there is a city along the Sea of Galilee that Jesus would oftentimes use as his headquarters. It does seem to be that he kind of requisitioned Peter's house as his kind of main base of operations in his earthly ministry, and that was there in Capernaum. So he enters there where he would have been fairly familiar. People would have known, seen his comings and goings from past kinds of times. And a centurion here came to him, pleading with him. Now, a centurion is a Roman soldier, but he's a soldier over 100. That's why we get the word centurion, right? He's a soldier over 100 other Roman soldiers, okay? So he's a Gentile, but he's a Gentile kind of high order, high class. Centurions were known for their nobility. They were known for their integrity. They were known for their strength. Rome had a lot of faults, and they had a lot of faults in their military, right? They were not a clean bunch by any means, right? But the centurions were held to a very high standard. And when you read about them through the Bible, they always seem to be people of quite high character and high degree, held to at least a fairly high regard because of their stature, right? What they were expected to be and do. Well, this centurion, here it says, came to him, pleading with him. But we're told in Luke chapter 7 that he does it through other ambassadors, okay? Now, some people get hung up on this. If I tell Aiden after service, hey, go tell mom that she can just go home with you rather than waiting for me after church, right? If he delivers my message the way I give him instructions to deliver my message to his mother, to my wife, right? Then it's as if I'm delivering the message directly. Just because it comes through a mediator, comes through an emissary, an ambassador, doesn't mean that it has any less authority or any less reality if the words are delivered the way they're supposed to. So this centurion is not meeting Jesus face to face. He's meeting him through emissaries, through people that are going to represent him to Jesus. And we'll find out why that's going on here in just a little bit, okay? But there's a reason why it's happening. And it's not because the centurion is kind of trying to keep a distance from Jesus because in some ways he doesn't feel like Jesus is worth him. The reason is because he doesn't want to mess up Jesus. Okay? He's a Gentile. Jesus is a Jewish rabbi. He's trying to respect the cultural differences and the distinctions. And so he's sending other people to speak on his behalf. First come religious Jews. Individuals there from Capernaum who appreciated the fact that the centurion contributed to their synagogue, right? He helped to build them a building, right? And so they come and they speak to him first, saying to Jesus on behalf of the centurion, Lord, my servant, now again, don't get hung up. It's his servant, but they're speaking as the centurion to Jesus. Lord, again, Lord, kurios, Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. Now, this is interesting because it's the first miracle we've seen. It's a man, obviously, still semi-mobile, right? We don't know what condition his feet were in. Whether he was walking on crutches or knees, did he lose his legs up to his ankles or something and have to kind of walk on his stubby knees? So we don't know. But he was still semi-mobile and could come to Jesus in his own volition. Here's a servant. He can't come to Jesus on his own. It becomes very much a picture of intercessory prayer. or somebody else is making request of Jesus for somebody who can't make the request themselves. And the centurion is coming and asking, basically, Lord, I have this servant. Lying at home means that he's stricken down and stuck because he's paralyzed. And in addition to that, it's a very painful type of situation. We don't know what he's dealing with, but that's his condition. He's down, he's powerless, and he's tormented. Well, Jesus said to him in verse 7, I'll come and heal him. Just, you don't want to deliberate? You don't want to check with your board first? You don't want to see whether or not you got enough money in the bank to pull this off? There's no deliberation. The request is made. Okay, sure, right? It's like, do you want to go to McDonald's with me? Sure, right? Would you like to go for a walk? It's okay. Would you like to come and heal somebody who's like almost dying? Sure, why not? Okay, that's fine. To him, it's not a thing, right? Oh, okay, I'll come and heal him. And then I'll go do lunch, and then I'll just schedule it into my day. It's all good, right? Isn't it remarkable, the simplicity? These situations are really only difficult to us. They are not difficult to him. In the Lord's eyes, I've heard this said many, many times, right? There is no big illness, right? This is the maker of heaven and earth. He spread out the universe with the span of his hand. There's no big illness. Stage 4 cancer to him can be like a cold. Now listen, both are God's grace because you can die from a cold, right? We're learning through COVID, right? You can die from a cold virus to the same degree that you can die from a cancer virus or a cancer situation, right? Both can be dangerous to a body that can't fight it off, right? But one is not more kind of threatening to Jesus than the other. Yeah, sure. I'll come, I'll heal him. Just simple. Well, the centurion answered then in verse 8, as Jesus is making his way toward the centurion's house, he sends now other servants. So this is a second group of people that come from the centurion, again, speaking on behalf of the centurion. And they answered and said, when they realized that Jesus is coming, they answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy. Keyword. I am not worthy that you should come under my roof. This gives us the demeanor of the centurion's attitude in this entire scene. I am not worthy. Literally, Edersheim again says that it is not fitting that me as a Gentile would have you as a Jew in my house. This apparently is why he is refraining from going to Jesus. And it's not, again, because he doesn't see Jesus worthy of him. He's afraid that Jesus isn't going to see him worthy of Jesus. He doesn't want to hurt Jesus in any way or put him in any type of spot. So he's deferring, right? It's just his appropriation of this grace, of this proper measure of humility. You look at all these scenes, by the way. There's no threatening God. There's no demanding. There's no holding out. There's no like hunger strike. I'm going to fast until you bring a healing, right? This kind of thing. Well, then die. Die and go to heaven, hopefully, but it's whatever. You're going to put God at, like, trip up God, right? You're going to oblige God, right? Make God do something for you that he knows is not in your best interest. He's not going to do that willfully. He's not going to participate in that kind of way. All these scenes, right, are an act of humility. And listen, you're going to get the best response of God when you approach him humbly versus when you approach him in arrogance, right? To the proud, he will put down. He will exalt the lowly, right? We come as beggars. We come needy. We don't come demanding, threatening, right? Claiming, blaming, claiming, blabbing, grabbing. We don't do any of that, right? We come humbly. It's God's will, ultimately. I'm not worthy, he says, that you should come under my roof. So only speak a word and my servant will be healed. Now, again, he's not dictating how this is supposed to go. What he's trying to do is he's trying to make allowance for Jesus to not have to defile himself by coming into his own house. Now, the reason he knows that Jesus can just speak this word is, he says in verse 9, for I also, key word, I also am a man under authority. So this man under authority recognizes another man under authority. Okay? It's remarkable how that works. the general respect that is kind of garnered and or earned by people who know a price that has been paid at the highest levels. Again, I love mixed martial arts. I love two highly skilled grapplers beating each other up. It's just one of my favorite joys in all of life, right? And it's great. And I'm always amazed, and Julie's always, if she gets stuck watching one of those fights with me. And why do they hug at the end? Now they're like friends? I mean, they were yelling at each other before the match. They were fighting each other, trying to destroy one another during the fight, and then the whole thing is over. Why do they hug? And I say, honey, it's respect. It's respect. Because they were willing to go 15 minutes, 25 minutes, and give their 100%. They recognized the price that was paid in the gym. They recognized the effort that was made to be able to bring that effort to that fight. And there's a garnering of respect as a result of that. They're not friends, right? They just really admire the efforts, right? And what we'll find is, as we grow to be people under authority, we'll recognize that Christ is a person under authority. But listen, if you're not under authority, you won't recognize Christ's authority or how it works. Right? Again, kind of to humble and be submitted is the first step in this whole thing. This man has learned it from his own practice. That's how he can recognize what Jesus is going to be and do for him as a result of it. I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. He says, I don't have to, we don't vote on it, right? Oh, I don't give him an explanation. I don't tell him, look, kind of thing, and certainly I don't put up with any insubordination, right? If he doesn't do it, we'll probably fire him the old-fashioned way. He will die. Thing, and that's the way it goes, kind of thing. So I say, come, he comes, he go, and he goes, do this, and he does it. That's just the way it works within the proper order of this military. And he says of Jesus then, you can issue the word, and the things under your order will respond in the same way. The centurion had the authority to give instructions to his soldiers because the centurion was under the authority of Rome. He was Caesar's centurion. In the same degree, Jesus has the authority to cast out these illnesses, to speak these words, because Jesus himself has demonstrated a submission to the throne of God. Right? Jesus' power comes through his own submission, right? He says over and over again in the book of John, I didn't do this on my own. I'm only doing what God told me to do. Right? Even Jesus himself submitted to the will of the Father. That's where his authority comes from. The centurion recognizes it.
We learn that Jesus uniquely holds together the things we often separate, grace and truth. This is not a contradiction. It's the fullness of God revealed. Well, Pastor Mike also highlighted the parallel between military authority and spiritual authority. That, like the centurion, Jesus too operated under a higher authority and therefore had the power to command with just a word. It's a deep challenge to anyone who seeks to follow Christ. If you want to walk in spiritual authority, you must first walk in submission. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for listening to the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.